Hey everyone, I'm Felicia Kashivaroff, an ICF certified relationship coach and founder of Tend to Task. If you've been following this Mental Load Fix series, you've learned what the mental load actually is, how to assess it in your own relationship, and the Progressive Handoff Method for redistributing it systematically. But here's what I hear most often from viewers. Felicia, this all makes sense, but how do I actually bring this up without starting World War III? Today, we're diving into the communication piece, the scripts, timing, and strategies that help these conversations land with curiosity instead of defensiveness. Having the right information is only half the battle. How you share it might determine whether your partner becomes your teammate in creating change or whether they shut down completely. Before we dive into specific scripts, let's talk about what creates the conditions for these conversations to go well. Research on difficult conversations shows us that timing, framing, and your own emotional state matter even more than the exact words you use. First, timing is everything. You want both people to feel relatively calm, not rushed, and not already stressed about something else. I work with many couples where one partner consistently brings up household management when they're irritated, busy, or in a hurry. Every conversation becomes an argument because the timing creates pressure rather than space for reflection. Second, and this is crucial, you're sharing information, not building a case for the prosecution. The mental load story assessment you did in part 2, that's data about your family's current system, not evidence of anyone's moral failings. When you approach it as, here's what I observe about our household currently functioning, versus here's everything you're doing wrong, you create curiosity instead of defensiveness. Third, start with your positive vision, not your frustrations. Simon Sinek once said, there are only two ways to influence human behavior. You can manipulate it or you can inspire it. When you lead with what you want to create together rather than what's currently bothering you, you're inviting your partner into possibility rather than putting them on trial. Here's a script that incorporates all three foundations. Hey, I've been thinking about how we can make our household run even better for both of us. I'd love to share some observations I've made about how we currently handle family logistics and get your thoughts. Is now a good time, or would later this evening work better? Notice what this does? It's future-focused, collaborative, and asks for consent to have the conversation. You're not cornering them, you're inviting them. Once you've set the stage, here's how to structure that first conversation. Begin by acknowledging what's already working in your partnership. We're not trying to manipulate here. Rather, we want to open with genuine recognition that helps your partner feel seen before you discuss areas for growth. This might sound something like, I really appreciate how we've built a home where both of us feel comfortable and supported. I love that we're both committed to making this work for our family. Then, share your positive vision from the work you did in part 1. I've been imagining what it would look like if we both felt like we had enough time for the things that matter to us, career goals, time with friends, or just feeling rested. I think there might be some ways we could share family responsibilities that would create more space for both of us to thrive. Now, you can introduce the mental load concept without making it about blame. I've been learning about something called the mental load. It's basically the thinking and planning work that goes into running a household. Things like remembering when the car registration is due, keeping track of what groceries we'd need, or coordinating social plans. I'm curious about how this works in our family and whether there might be ways to share it more intentionally. End with a clear request for partnership. I'd like us to look at this together and figure out how to share this work more intentionally. This is about more than fairness. It's about both of us having the mental space to show up fully in our relationship and our individual lives. Are you willing to explore this with me? This framing positions the mental load as a family system to optimize rather than a problem to solve. You're inviting collaboration, not delivering a lecture. Now, when your partner says yes to exploring this together, you'll want to share what you discovered during your mental load story assessment from part 2. This can be where conversations go sideways, so let's be strategic. Present your findings as information, not conclusions. Here's the framework. I tried that assessment exercise I mentioned where I tracked who handles different types of thinking work for our family. I mapped out last weekend when we had your parents visit, and I was surprised by some of what I noticed. Would you like to hear what I found? Then share specific observations without interpretation. For example, I realized that I was the one who remembered to buy the food they'd like, figured out the timing for meals, and kept track of how everyone was feeling throughout the visit. You handled the logistics of their arrival and departure and made sure the guest room was comfortable. Notice that this acknowledges both people's contributions while highlighting the invisible cognitive work. Then, and this is crucial, genuinely ask for their perspective. How did that weekend feel from your end? Did you notice yourself doing any of that behind-the-scenes thinking work that I might have missed? Many people discover that once they understand what the mental load actually is, they can identify ways they're already doing it that weren't visible before. This isn't about proving a point. It's about developing a shared understanding of your current system. If your partner seems surprised by the assessment results, validate that reaction. I know, I was surprised too when I started paying attention to this. It's not that anyone's doing anything wrong, it's just that a lot of this thinking work happens automatically, so it's not easy to notice it. Okay, let's be realistic. Even with the best framing, you might encounter some resistance. Here are some common responses you might hear and how to navigate them. When they say, but you're just better at remembering things, or you care more about having things organized. Try this. I can understand why it seems that way, but I've learned the skills I have come from practice, not natural ability. When someone handles something regularly, they inevitably get better at it. I'm wondering if we could experiment with sharing some of these responsibilities so we can both develop these necessary organizational muscles. When they say, I always help when you ask me to do something, try this. I really appreciate your willingness to help when I ask, and I've come to realize that the asking itself is actually part of the mental load by keeping track of what needs to be done and when. I'm curious if there are some areas where you could eventually take full ownership, including the remembering and planning parts, so I don't need to be the one keeping track. When they say, you never told me you wanted me to handle those things, try this. You're absolutely right. We've never explicitly talked about who handles what kind of thinking work. That's exactly what I'm hoping we can figure out together now. I'm less concerned about what's happened before. Now I'd like to structure how we want to set things up going forward. When they say, it feels like you're keeping score of everything I do wrong, try this. I hear you saying this feels like scorekeeping, and I can understand how you might feel that way. But I'm actually trying to move away from keeping track of everything myself by finding ways for us to both stay aware of what our family needs. The goal is less scorekeeping, not more. Once you've had the initial conversation and shared your assessment results, you can introduce the Progressive Handoff Method from Part 3. Here's how to frame it. Based on what we talked about, I'd like to try something different. Instead of me continuing to handle all the thinking work around a specific area, I want you to take ownership of it. There's a systematic approach where we start small and build up your familiarity step by step, and I think it could really work well for us. We'll pick one area to start with, maybe something that doesn't feel too high stakes, and I'll walk you through how I currently handle it. Then, you take it over as a trial run. We'll meet regularly to assess how things are going. Does that sound interesting to you? This positions the handoff as a collaborative experiment rather than a demand. You're offering your expertise as a resource, not withholding it as punishment. I want to be upfront that there will probably be a learning curve, and that's totally normal. I've been handling some of this stuff for years, and I don't expect you to be an expert immediately. The goal is just to start building your confidence with it. And honestly, when I'm not carrying all this mental load myself, I'll have so much more energy to be the partner I actually want to be, more present, more fun, and less stressed about everything. Setting this expectation upfront protects your relationship during the transition. When you acknowledge that mistakes and forgotten tasks are part of the learning process, you prevent those inevitable slip-ups from becoming relationship conflicts. Instead of your partner feeling defensive when they forget something, they can focus on problem solving. Remember that growth mindset concept from part 3? This is how you apply it to mental load redistribution. Treating challenges as learning opportunities rather than evidence that the approach isn't working. The goal of all these conversations isn't to prove you're right or to get your partner to do things exactly your way. The goal is to create a shared understanding of how your household currently functions and to experiment with new ways of sharing the cognitive work. Some of these conversations will go smoothly. Others will be awkward or even tense. That's normal when you're changing established patterns. What matters is that you keep approaching it as a team working on a shared problem rather than adversaries keeping score. In part 5 of this series, we'll tackle what happens next, how to navigate the inevitable bumps when your partner forgets things, handles tasks differently than you would, or even quietly stops trying. We'll cover strategies for maintaining momentum without becoming the mental load police, and how to troubleshoot when the progressive handoff hits snags. If you want step-by-step guidance for these exact conversations, I've created a mini course called How to Get Your Partner on Board that walks you through the entire process, from timing these discussions to handling resistance to getting genuine buy-in for change. You can find the link in the description. Thanks for watching, and remember, these skills take practice. You're not aiming for perfect conversations, you're aiming for honest ones.